actually after 8:30, so if everyone could take a seat, we can get started. Good morning, everyone. We're actually a little behind schedule, so I'd like to get started. Thank you, everybody, for coming this morning, and welcome. There are plenty of seats up on, I think, the left-hand, or my left-hand side, your right. Okay, I'm going to start talking so that we have, I want to make sure we all have time to ask our speakers plenty of questions. So welcome, everyone. I'm Isabel D'Amico. I'm the current chair of ULI Sacramento. Planning for this event started several months ago, really with one goal in mind, and that is trying to identify solutions and working in partnership to produce transitional housing at a meaningful scale for our Sacramento region as soon as possible. So thank you to everybody who is here today, because everybody in this room is part of that solution. I'm going to make a few announcements to kick off this event. So first of all, we have several elected representatives here today from throughout our Sacramento region. We really appreciate you being here. We have from the County of El Dorado, Supervisor Lori Parlin, District 4. From Placer County, we have Supervisor Susanna Jones, also District 4. From Sacramento County, we have Supervisor Rich Desmond for District 3. For Sacramento County, we also have newly elected Supervisor Pat Hume, District 5. From City of Elk Grove, Councilmember Sergio Robles. Thank you for coming. From City of Sacramento, Councilmember Sean Laloe. Thank you for being here. City of Rockland, Councilmember Jill Gallardo. City of Yuba City, Councilmember Mark Boomgarden, District 2. And SMUD Director Greg Fishman is also here. So thank you for being here, all of our electeds. All of our programming and efforts here at ULI Sacramento are possible due to support from our annual sponsors. We really can't do anything without our annual sponsors. So SMUD and Taylor Builders are our platinum sponsors. Our gold sponsors are Buzz Oats, LDK Ventures, and Hanson Bridget. And Hanson Bridget hosted a reception for us last night. Thank you, Robin. Our silver sponsors, Best and Krieger, ESA, Stonebridge Properties, Weintraub Tobin, and Panettone. And finally, our bronze sponsors shown here. So thank you all to our annual sponsors. We can't do any of this stuff without you. So for this particular event, we also received a lot of support from sponsors and partnering organizations. So thank you for helping to make this event possible today. Our Salazar Architects and Sutter Health are our presenting sponsors. Our supporting sponsors for this program are Avdis and Cucci, thank you, Nick and Dan, 5 Star Bank, RQ Studio, thank you, Mark, and SKK Developments, thank you, Satiri. So, and then in addition, we had so many partnering organizations that helped us get the word out about this event, and they're listed here on the screen. Thank you so much for coming and being part of this event and helping us to promote it. Okay, so before we break for the summer, we've got a few upcoming programs and announcements. So first of all, Amy Lurzeth, are you here, Amy? Okay, I know she's coming today. She may not be here yet. Amy Lurzeth of Buzz Oats will be succeeding me as chair of ULI Sacramento starting July 1st. So if she comes in, I just want you all to see her face. Secondly, our Women's Golf Academy is being held in April and May. So if you're a woman in this industry or you know a woman in this industry who wants to learn enough basic golf skills to get out and do business development, this is such a great opportunity. We're going to cram 4 clinics into April and May so that As a new golfer, you're ready to play in these scramble tournaments and do business development. So I encourage you to sign up for that, and registration is open. So we're also holding a program in April to delve into real estate development in historically underinvested communities. So on April 20th, we're going to be hosting a guest speaker from Oklahoma City, Sandino Thompson. He's attracting national attention for the work that he has done on his East Point development. So Sandino's going to come to Sacramento, and then we're going to have a local panel as well. Also in late May, we're going to hold an event around public art and the built environment. More details to come on that. So if you want to get connected with ULI Sacramento, we have a weekly email that goes out that tells you everything we're doing, and then our website is a great spot to find out about us. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Bob Chase, who has co-chaired this program along with John Hodgson, who could not be here today. And so we're grateful to both John and Bob for all, and their entire organizing committee for everything, all of their hard work leading up to today. So with that, Bob, take it away.
Thank you all. Good morning. What a great crowd to see here. As Isabel mentioned, none of this would be happening today without the efforts of my friend and colleague, John Hodgson, who I think many of you know. We have been working on this tirelessly for the last 3 years or more, and he came down with COVID the other day. So fortunately, we are recording the session so that John will at least be able to, kind of hear what happened, see what happened. So, but such a sad state of affairs. He put so much into this thing. So he's put all the weight on my shoulders now to speak for. So if I misspeak anything, it's really John doing that. Anyway, quick background on what's happened here. John and I had co-chaired the ULI Housing Committee. I'm an architect, by the way. I'm also a member of both the ULI and the AIA, former president of the AIA chapter here. John and I co-chaired the Housing Committee for a number of years, and I know Robin Burrell is here, who's now the chair. And we realized after a while, we were focusing on, getting affordable housing built. We realized, wait a minute, there's a gap here. We need to focus on something else, and that being transitional housing. So John and I kind of split off and just developed a new focus 3 years ago, and have been working on that this ever since to reach the point here. The key was to really try to see, we all know, coming from the private sector, we know, and I have been in the government, so I've served with the city, chief building official, the state, deputy state architect. I've got a sense of both sides. And do I love the government? Absolutely. Can they operate as quickly as the private sector? No, they can't, unfortunately. I know they want to. But so we're here to try to help them do that. And that's really been the motivation behind our efforts here, is to try to just assist the governments to move forward, to get some transitional housing built. So we looked around when we decided to set our own focus. We looked around to see what's been done elsewhere. And we looked at Los Angeles, which had a collaboration of the ULI and the AIA down there working on housing concepts with the mayor's office at that time. And we connected up with them and met one of the folks from DLR Architects down there, and decided there was a good model there, that collaboration. So we began to work on that up here. Knowing many of the architects in the area, I kind of colluded or convinced 4 architect firms here who just have been so dedicated to doing public work and pro bono work to get involved and help us out. And they have done so. When you have time to go around, please look at all of the boards that are in the room. The ones up front here are the ones that our team has really assembled, trying to get things going, setting up some models, some concepts that could be done on public property, church property around the area, and just some really great concepts. Mostly involving tiny homes, but a few other alternatives as well. So I do want to mention DLR, the architect firms DLR, Dreyfus and Blackford, Chris, you'll hear on the panel here, Mogavera Architects, who David has been a friend of mine for many, many years, and WHA Architects, so we have a fellow here from here. I do need to give a shout out to Connor Mugen, who is with DLR, who has put in a lot of work, and he is in LA today, working in their LA office on a transitional housing project down there. So wish he could be here, but we'll try to do him proud. Anyway, the team had developed these concepts. We A year and a half, God, time flies. 2021, Mayor Steinberg had heard what we were doing, asked to see our presentation, our slideshow. He did. It was the time, many of you remember, he was going to City Council with a master plan of 20 sites, instead of doing it piecemeal, one by one, to get approved all at once by the City Council. And they were successful in that approval. But prior to that, he saw our slideshow presentation, and he said, I want you folks to go first, because I want you to kind of, ease the crowd into what could be happening if we do something right here. So we did. We were proud to have done that, and then began a number of conversations with city staff, the mayor, and others. And unfortunately, here we are today. How many things have been built and done today? Zip. So we are hoping we'll all walk out of here today with some conviction to get things done, both us in the private sector and our colleagues in the government that are many of here today. I know my council members here. I serve on the Planning Commission for the city as well, Planning Design Commission. We also, along the way, as I think a reason of why the private sector should and could get involved in this quickly, we were asked by the city and the county to look at a piece of property on the Cal Expo grounds. Made a lot of sense, great, a lot of property there, and even funding. Our Senator McCarty even came up with some funding to make something happen there on Lot Z. We developed some plans on it, some concepts, and then Chris Holt and I one day said, we should go over and look at that site, because you have to be able to get into. We went in and looked at it and said, wait a minute, this is in the floodplain. You can't build here. And so, again, private sector experience, I think, can make quick decisions like that and keep things from going too far, wasting a lot of time and money. But as I said, so to date, really, not much has been happening. We run through this quickly. We put some things together for the, we also brought on, and I know he's here, Steve Waters with First Step Communities. We realize architects can draw great pictures and come up with designs, but it's don't want to have meaning unless we know what we're dealing with, what we're trying to do. Steve, as the First Step Communities, as a service provider for a number of these things, joined our team to help us decide, determine what should be in there. How many people do you try to, house in one location? How do you provide the services? I'll go quickly through these, but these are some of the things that we spent a fair amount of time looking at. What should be in there? I think that the thing that came out more often than not was the fact that we've got to have dignity. There has to be respect in these properties. These are, it's the old there, but for the grace of God go out, it's really true. I mean, all kinds of things have, can happen, and any of us could be out there at some point in time. So they're all us. They're all our neighbors, and we need to work together to bring these people in. So some of these ideas, in fact, on the right, you'll see one of the Steve Waters' project. There he's in the back there. This is at the Grove in North Sacramento. These are actually these tiny homes. These were built by Tough Shed, which is an alternative to the pallet homes, which many have seen. But we really don't care who builds them. We just want to get them built and out there. This is an interesting alternative. Nate Seebach, who's here, I was served as deputy state architect. That's involved in schools throughout the state. One of the things schools have, portables. You've seen them all around, modular construction. Well, we realized, is that an alternative? This is an example of what could be done. Tiny homes are great, but they're limited, 64 to 80 to 100 square feet, 2, 4 people, you want to cram them in there, but that's it. What about families? This concept would allow families, units that would be built in the factory and then trucked to a site, to have doors and connections to allow people to have a family in there, parents, kids in the next room, keep going. So again, ideas that are out there that we can hopefully look into. And then there are a few sites that we have as a team taken a real look at. We've connected up with some churches out there. This is one down in South Sacramento. We've looked at, again, that's the family-oriented thing. The other was the tiny homes. Another church property. We keep these confidential because we've been asked to by the church. However, every time we show this slide to an elected or anyone else, they recognize the site. But it would be ideal. So a few different, looser, tighter, different kinds of arrangements of what could be done on these properties, and some great overviews here. So that's to give you a sense, and I'll have this up later on, but some acknowledgments to the folks who have been a part of this project. So following this, we've also begun to have some, again, the city, we only went so far, we just haven't really kind of been able to kick things off. We've started having more conversations with the county of Sacramento, and those are very positive to date, so we're looking forward to that moving. Anyway, as a result of all of this, we realized we needed to bring something forward to the public, and John and I started talking about it, so we should create an event. ULI did one 3 years ago, just pre-pandemic, and had a great turnout. we decided to set another one here, but we said we've got to have somebody. We need somebody dynamic who's going to really come in and light the fire here and get things going. Well, we were fortunate to find Ken Kraft, and I think you will agree after you've heard him speak. We looked outside the area, partly because we haven't done much here, but also we need to, what can we learn, lessons learned from what somebody else has done out there. So as I say, we've invited Ken up, and we were blown away, to put it mildly, when we first heard him speak on our first Zoom call. So I look forward to bringing him up here. Before I forget, though, I do want to encourage everybody, Isabel said, to check out the boards that are here. They show the work that we've done as a team, but there are also photos of some other projects that are real, that are out there happening right now. One in particular that's very interesting is my friend and colleague, Maria Grigiak, architect at the back of the room. She's developed, and it's just opened up, a place called Paul's Place in Davis, and look at that board and talk to her about it. It's a hybrid. It's a hard construction building, but the first floor, just takes in people daily that need to get fed, and then as you move in up the floors, it becomes a little bit more permanent. So a very interesting hybrid approach here. Enough said by me. With that, I'd like to bring up Ken Kraft, and I forgot to bring my notes of Ken's background. He's, I think 13 years he's been doing projects down in Los Angeles. Primarily started out in the San Fernando Valley, where I lived for 20 years when I was in LA. I knew a lot of the sites that Ken had worked with. When we saw the concepts and the photos of what he had done, we said, we've got to talk to this guy. We've got to find, how did this happen? How can we make this happen up here? And he is originally a pastor. I think he's been doing this transitional housing effort for the last 13 years or so. We'll hear correctly how it's gone. And the number of beds and the number of shelters that he has operating now, and you correct me, I don't know, 13 or so out there, and opening more of them all the time. So with that, I know I've missed a lot of your background, Ken, and I apologize for that, for leaving my notes over there. But I think I'd like to just bring up Ken and let him speak. Sorry, buddy. Sorry about the shortchanging you.
Thank you, Bob. Honestly, it's a privilege to be here and to share with you. And basically what I can do is tell you what we've done. I don't know how much of it necessarily correlates exactly what's happening here in the greater Sacramento area, but I do know this. We have a humanitarian crisis. The numbers of people that are living on our streets in encampments is unacceptable. In Los Angeles, we have a point-in-time count every year in January. Okay, it's been upwards to 70,000 people living on the streets in Los Angeles. And we know we have to do more and we have to do better. And so as a leader of a nonprofit, we've worked really hard to be aggressive, to be responsive, and to do whatever we can to bring people indoors. And it started, I've been doing homeless services for a number of years now, but it was a little over a year, almost a year and a half ago, that I decided to be homeless myself. So I lived 100 hours unsheltered on the streets of Los Angeles. To be honest with you, I've never lived a night unsheltered. I've never gone without a meal. And I wanted to experience that. So it was in December, a couple years ago, had my jacket, our CFO and president was with me, we did it together, and I had a backpack, and we set out to discover what is it really like. I had $5 to last the entire week. Okay, I was watching the weather channel, the Pacific storm is coming in, it's going to be 38 degrees at night. There's two things in life I hate. Number one, I hate being cold, and number two, I hate not getting my sleep. Those two things will push me over the edge. And so the gentleman who designed the show Intervention with drugs and alcohol, that show, he said, I will document this experience for you. I said, okay. So instead of letting us go out at 3 in the afternoon when it was light, they waited till it was 7 o'clock. It had started raining, it was cold, and they took us to a location we didn't know where we were being dropped off. They dropped us off and said, good luck. And so we took off running, and we found a freeway overpass, and we slept in the dirt. At about 4 a.m. in the morning, I leaned over to my partner over here, Ro, and I said, this is stupid. I said, why are we doing this? I mean, I hadn't slept. I kept standing up doing jumping jacks, trying to stay warm. And about 4 a.m., I'm ready to tap out. And I told him, I said, I don't want to do this anymore. I said, I'm ready to tap. He said, I bet our guests wish they could tap out too. And I said, okay, all right. At 4:30, we walked to a coffee shop. I got a big cup of coffee. It was the best cup of coffee I've ever had in my life. I drank that cup of coffee and I came back to life again. The only problem is now I got to go to the bathroom. And there's no bathroom at the donut shop. Fortunately, there was a Taco Bell across the street. I run to Taco Bell. I use the bathroom. Now I need to charge my cell phone because you can't charge cell phones underneath freeway overpasses. Aha, Starbucks. We ran to Sepulveda Boulevard, only to discover Starbucks has removed all of their electrical outlets because they don't want the homeless there charging their phones. So now what are we going to do? But while we were there, I looked to my left and there was a homeless gentleman who was just sitting in the corner. So I'm going to go talk to this guy. I go over to him. I said, hey, I said, how you doing? He said, all right. I said, pretty cold last night, huh? And listen, by this time I looked homeless, okay? I had been rolling around in dirt at night. Okay, I'm looking homeless. And I said, pretty cold last night. He goes, yeah. And he told me where he slept. And I said, listen, man, I'm newly homeless. I said, what advice would you give me? What do you suggest I do? He looked at me and said, man, you need to go to Hope of the Valley. Okay, I'm the CEO at Hope of the Valley. He's telling me, you need to go to Hope. And I said, really? He goes, oh, yeah. I said, you think they'd help somebody like me? He goes, oh, yeah, they help everybody. I said, really? And I said, well, if they help everybody, why are you here? And he said, well, they did help me. They took me in, and they got me a job. And then I saved enough money, and I moved out. Then the pandemic hit. I lost my job, and I'm back on the streets. I've been calling them every day, asking if I can get back in, but they're at capacity. I'm like, he has no idea who he's talking to. And I walked away. I called our nearest interim housing site, and I said, I don't care what you got to do. I said, you need to get this guy back in. And they said, we're sending a van right now. I went back to him. His name was Christian. I said, hey, Christian. I said, listen, man, I haven't been totally honest with you. I said, I am homeless, but only part-time until Friday. I'm going home on Friday. And he's looking at me, and I said, yeah, my name's Ken Kraft. I'm the CEO at Hope of the Valley. And his eyes got as big as saucers. And I said, listen, brother, man, I can't stand the thought of you spending one more night in this weather. And he started crying, and I started crying, and about that time, the van pulled up, and I said, listen, brother, you're going to be inside tonight. And he got in the van, and he left. And I continued to live that entire week, each night, trying to find a place to sleep. It was so cold. My takeaway from that was that it was nearly impossible to stay sober, sane, and safe living on the streets. I could not have held down a job that week. Why? Because I didn't know where I'd put my belongings. I didn't know where I was going to sleep that night. Everywhere I tried to sleep, if it's on a bench, they've got the bars so you can't sleep on the bench. I found a little nook that I thought would work, spotlights come on. I found another area, security guards would come and say, you can't be here. I mean, it was really difficult to find someplace. And I realized we have to bring people indoors. We need a FEMA-like response to the humanitarian crisis that we're facing in our cities. God forbid if there was an emergency and there was an earthquake here in Sacramento and we had, let's just take the number of homeless people in LA. There were 70,000 people that were living in red-tagged buildings that now all of a sudden were homeless. The National Guard would be here within hours. Red Cross would be mobilized within hours. We would make sure that our brothers and sisters were cared for and they were brought inside. Meanwhile, we continue to say it's a humanitarian crisis. It's a humanitarian crisis. We have a crisis on our hands. We yawn and we go to bed and get up the next morning and nothing changes. And yet people are suffering and people are dying. Every night, between 4 and 6 people die on the streets of Los Angeles because they are homeless. And so we know we must do more. And I happened to start an organization 13 years ago called Hope of the Valley Rescue Mission. Now, we changed the name now to Hope the Mission because we've expanded beyond the San Fernando Valley. We currently have 15 interim housing sites with 1,400 beds. In the next 6 months, that will grow to 18, probably 19 sites, and we will have 2,300 beds. And it's still a drop in the bucket. But I am driven by the need. I tell our board and our staff, the shoe cannot tell the foot how big it should be. If you need a bigger shoe, get a bigger shoe. And we must do more. You might say, well, Ken, how has Los Angeles been able to mobilize? How have they been able to scale a solution? How have they done that? And it's rather interesting. And you have to go back a little bit. In 2016, the voters of Los Angeles passed a bond measure, Triple H bond measure. It was approved by 77% of the voters, $1.2 billion to create 10,000 units of affordable housing. We all cheered, yes, we're going to solve this problem. That was in 2016. In 2017, we passed another bond measure. It was Measure H, which is for the county. $355 million for 10 years to provide all the wraparound services. Yes, we're going to solve this problem. 2018 comes. How many housing units do you think were online? 0. And Mayor Eric Garcetti did one of the best things, as far as I'm concerned, that he could have ever done, for which I am eternally indebted to him. He declared a shelter emergency. That changed the game. It changed everything, because before he declared a shelter emergency, organizations like Hope of the Valley, we could only open up interim housing sites that had 30 beds or less by right, unless you got a conditional use permit. But to get a conditional use permit, you had to have public hearings. Everybody in the community comes out, yells and screams, not in my backyard. Politicians are taking a look around. No. And it was very difficult. And you could only be in zoning that was C2CM. Now we're in M1, M2. I mean, and that 30-bed limit, we're opening up facilities, 100 beds, 200 beds. There's no limit. It changed the game. And so in 2018, all of a sudden, we had constantly had headwinds. The winds shifted, and they came to our back. And through this emergency declaration, now we were able to utilize technology and innovation to create emergency housing, interim housing, to address the humanitarian crisis. We worked with the city of Los Angeles to open up the very first tiny home community. It was 39 units on Rec and Park land. Then, 2 months later, we opened up the second one, 113 units on Rec and Park land. A couple months later, opened up another one that was 52 units on a city parking lot that was underutilized. Next month, we opened up another one, 75 units on Metro parking lot. That it was just a parking lot, no one ever used it. And then we opened up another one, another 75 units that was on Caltrans land in North Hollywood. And then another one that we opened up that was on Rec and Park land. And we found there's land out there. Where there's a will, there's a way. But you have to have the political will. We have to have politicians that are willing to step up and say, we can do this. Now, I'll tell you, there was motivation in LA. What motivated the politicians? A lawsuit. Yep. The Alliance for Human Rights in Los Angeles filed a lawsuit against the city of LA and said, LA, you keep wiping out all these encampments of people, but you don't have anywhere for people to go. And so there was a judge named David Carter, federal judge. He picked up the case and he said, all right, I'll do my own research. He went to all the various city council districts within LA, talked to people like myself and many others. And then he called the city council back into session and says, listen, I've done my research. LA, you don't have beds. You don't have anywhere for people to go. You're going to wipe out these encampments, these people that already don't have much. You're traumatizing them again and again, and you have no solution to address this. So here's what I'm going to do. I am not going to allow you to enforce your no camping laws anymore until such time as you can provide beds for 60% of the previous year's homeless count. Why 60%? How did he come up with that number? Because he had already done something similar in Orange County. And here's what he found. First of all, it is illegal to camp in a park, right? And we're a nation of laws, and I believe the law must be applied equally to the rich and to the poor. But if you're going to tell someone you can't camp there, and you can't afford housing in LA, a single bedroom apartment is $2,200, okay, and you don't have a solution, where do you want them to go? What do you want them to do? We need solutions, not just complaining. And so if there's a park that has 100 people that are homeless, and you tell them you can't be there, well, then where are they going to go? But how about if government and the private sector work together, and we're also a nation of compassion. We've always been a nation of compassion. I mean, when there's natural disasters around the world, who steps up first? The United States. And we need to care for our own also. And so let's say we now create 100 tiny homes. And here's what the judge found out. If you create 100 tiny homes, and now you say, listen, you can't be here, but we've made provisions for you. Here's what he discovered. 20% of those people will self-resolve. They're not going to take advantage of this. They're going to self-resolve. They have a place to go to. Another 20%, they're shelter resistant. They're not coming in. They're not going to utilize those services. But 60% of those people, they are going to come inside. And that's why Judge David Carter said that you must come up with housing for 60% of the previous year's homeless count. I'm going to tell you the highlight of my year last year. I was standing at the 5th location we had opened in one particular council district office, Councilman Paul Krikorian, in the North Hollywood area, Studio City area, Van Nuys area. He was standing there, Mayor Eric Garcetti, I was standing there, and Councilman Paul Krikorian said, because of our partnership with Hope in the Valley and the mayor's office, I can now proudly say we have beds for everybody that is street homeless in my council district. The first council member to be able to say that. Why? Because he took it serious. And he put his political neck out on the line. Yeah, but then people started other council districts trying to send their people in because he had the beds. But we had a solution for that. And that is our homeless management information system. When we do outreach and engagement, every time we engage somebody, we have geotags and we know where they're from. And so when you take the risk, you create the solution, it should be for those people that are in that area. And that's how we've been able to do it. But now we've got city council members, all of them working together to create solutions. And so anyhow, it's really been an incredible journey. And I probably got way ahead of myself here. Where was I? The challenge to, creating, rapid housing, the policies. We've got to be willing, policies can either make it or break it. And politicians, you have so much power. You've got the authority. You can make changes. You can either restrict it or you can release it. And then there's always community resistance. I mean, last night I'm on the phone because we're opening up a 100-unit site for families. It's going to be 400 beds. It's in Woodland Hills. It's a hotel. And the Woodland Hills Homeowners Association, they're up in arms. How dare you bring these people here? Put them over in Pacoima. And I go to Pacoima and they're like, don't bring them here. Put them over in Sun Valley. And NIMBYism is very, very real. I've literally had death threats. Death threats. You bring that to me and I'll effing kill you is what I've been told. Fortunately, they haven't been successful. But we're going to keep working. But we have to overcome community resistance because these are our brothers and sisters. These are our neighbors. Okay, we have to find solutions. You might say, yeah, but they're all a bunch of drug addicts. They're all a bunch of, they're all mentally ill. There are a percentage for sure. But you know what I found? When we can bring people indoors and treat them humanely, treat them as humans, all of a sudden now I can begin to address those underlying issues. We actually launched our own mental health department a year ago. Why? Because it was taking so long for the Department of Mental Health to be able to respond because there aren't enough people in the DMH with the need. So we launched our own. And we will now, in the next year, have a mental health professional clinician inside every one of our sites. Why? Because it's needed. It's needed. So we have to overcome community resistance, and we do that by listening. What are their concerns? Security. We have security guards at every one of our sites, multiple security guards. And we have fencing, and we make it beautiful. Single point of entry. We have video surveillance. We see everything that goes on. There's no drugs, no alcohol, no weapons. And before we open up any of our sites, we'll take 3 days for open house. Everybody in the community, come look, come see what we've done. And here's what I do. I will give those tours, our staff will give those tours, and sometimes our biggest detractors, those that are saying you shouldn't have this here, after I give them tours and I show them all the services, we're going to have case management, housing navigation, job training, job placement, and address all those issues. I'll ask them, so what do you think? Do you think it's better to have them here or in an encampment on the streets? And I've yet to have one person say, I think an encampment would be better. No, but what you're not up on, you're down on. Ignorance breeds fear. In the absence of information, people create their own narratives. And we have a chance on our watch. We're all going to be dead and gone at some point. This is our watch that we can and will address this humanitarian crisis. If we can put a man on the moon, for God's sake, we can solve this problem. We can do it. There's enough innovation and creativity. So, and the funding, I think funding follows ideas. I'm not worried about the funding part. And so, when it comes to methodologies of interventions, I am completely agnostic. I don't care. Okay, I don't care if it's a tiny home. I don't care who the manufacturer is, the tiny homes. I don't care if it's repurposing a building. I don't care if it's using an R1. We've taken R1 housing. We've taken 10, 12 bedroom houses and used them. I mean, we'll do whatever we need to do. And so just like an example, this right here, this was a convent. It was for nuns, all right? There's these one-off buildings all over the place. And you find them and you convert them into housing, affordable housing. This right here, you notice it says TREB. It actually says Trebek Center. I was in my office, a couple years ago, and I get a phone call. This guy says, hello, is this Ken? I said, yes. He goes, this is Alex Trebek. He says, I see you're building shelters. I'd like to come look at one of them. In my mind, I'm thinking, is this Alex Trebek from Jeopardy? Or is this Alex Trebek from Pacoima? I don't know. I couldn't tell by his voice. And I said, well, I'll meet you at 9 a.m. Here's the address of the one that we're building in North Hollywood. He shows up in a big Ram truck. Sure enough, it's Alex Trebek. And I give him a tour, and he looks at it, and he goes, I like it. And I took him to our navigation center, and I showed him that. And he says, Ken, I need to go. He goes, I'm not feeling very good. I took nighttime cold medicine, and my wife said I should have just rescheduled, but I wanted to see it. I'll be in touch. 1 week goes by, 2 weeks go by, 3 weeks go by. He didn't call me. I'm thinking, it just wasn't his thing. He calls me. He goes, Ken, how much money you make? And I said, just over $100,000. I said, would it be helpful if I sent you our audited financials? He goes, yes. I sent our audited financials. He calls me back and says, Ken, I'd like you to come to my house tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. I said, yes, I'll be there. Who doesn't want to go to Alex Trebek's house, right? So I go to Alex Trebek's house. And he invites me into his library, and I don't know what it was. I was sitting in a chair. I was so low, and he was so high. I just felt like, I was going to be lectured. On his desk was our audited financials. They were highlighted, notated, and he goes, I see that you have social enterprise, which we do. We have 5 thrift stores. We generate about $6 million in unrestricted income through our 6 thrift stores. It goes right back into homeless services. He goes, I like that. He goes, and the reason why I asked you how much money you make, he goes, I've supported charities before only to find out that the CEOs are making large sums of money. And he goes, that's just not where I want my money going. And he slid me a check and an envelope, and I said, can I open this? And he says, yeah, and I opened it. It was a check for $100,000, which we used for not this shelter, but another one. And I said, hey, can I get a picture with you? And he says, not with me looking like this. You're going to have to come to Jeopardy for that. And so he arranged for my wife and I to go to Jeopardy. In the middle of taping, he stops and he says, I'm going to ask that Ken and Lori would come up here. And he took pictures and he says, listen, I don't normally do this, but these guys, they're on the front lines making stuff happen in LA. And just before we're getting ready to open this other shelter, he says, can I bring my wife by? I said, yes. His wife came by, and then I went and showed him another facility, which was, well, this is the inside of that one, but to show another one, and at that time, he gave me another check for $500,000. And that $500,000 became the seed money to purchase a roller rink. Okay, it's called Skateland. It was either us or the pot growers, and we won. Yes, yes. And so we came in here and renovated this entire site, 107 cubicle units. It's at capacity every night. And so I knew I was going to take that money and use that as a down payment to purchase this building. And about when I was just getting ready to call him back and let him know, I heard on the radio that he had passed away because of his cancer. I called his wife and said, would you guys be okay if we named the Trebeck Center? And she said, absolutely. And so this is the Trebeck Center, which is to honor the legacy of Alex. But also we have other shelters that are sprung structures. Okay? Again, I'm agnostic. These sprung structures, we call it the bubble shelter. It's just a big bubble, okay? But inside you have all these cubicle units and it's temperature controlled. It works, okay? And then the tiny homes. These tiny homes, they're great. It takes an hour to put this together. An hour, all right? Now, it doesn't qualify for R1 zoning, all right, because there's no water inside, but we have separate hygiene units, and they're really nice. I mean, you open up and I've spent the night in our tiny homes multiple times. Okay, I want people to know, if I'm going to ask someone else to do it, I'm going to do it. And so these tiny homes are 64 square feet. Inside is air conditioning, there's heating, okay, there's electrical outlets, and people can charge their phones. And, this site right here is the one that's 117 units, and it is like an art gallery. This is right off the 110 freeway between downtown Los Angeles and Pasadena. And what happened is Google called us and said, listen, we have some artwork we'd like to donate to you. Okay, our president and CFO said, wait a minute, you're Google. You're YouTube. Why don't you guys do something that really matters? He challenged them. And they said, like what? He said, why don't you paint an entire village? And they had this show that was on called Instant Influencer, where that particular year it was for artists. And so all these artists from around the world were trying to win the Instant Influencer of the Year. And they said, you know what? We're going to allow the winner of this show to be able to paint the entire 117 units. And so the winner came in, brought in all of his artist friends, and I mean, it is stunning when you walk through. It is an art installation. Why? Because sometimes if it's just a bunch of white buildings, it looks like a concentration camp. Okay, we want it to be dignified. We want it to be life-giving. We want it to be inspiring, and it works. And so this is the inside of one of the tiny homes. You see there's 2 beds. You see there's heater, there's air conditioning, there's storage underneath, the electrical outlets, there's smoke detectors, there's fire extinguishers, and most importantly, there's a front door that locks. And especially for so many of the women who've been sexually abused and traumatized. A lot of folks, the reason why they start using methamphetamines is to stay awake at night. Because at nighttime, that's when all the theft is happening and the assaults are happening. I remember when we opened up, the tiny homes, sometimes we had to convince people that it's okay to come inside. They were afraid to come inside because it was new and they hadn't seen it before. But once they came inside, it was really a game changer. But I remember one gentleman, he had not been inside, he had not slept indoors since the Northridge earthquake in 1996. He was so traumatized because his building collapsed. We finally convinced him to give it a try. He came in, he slept on the floor with the door open and his feet outside the door for the first 3 nights. eventually he was able to close the door. And those stories like that, women who've been raped that finally came inside, could close the door, lock it, and could begin to sleep for the first time. Just this past week, we had the ribbon cutting, for a 43-unit, 172-bed facility for mostly moms and kids, and this is part of Project Home Key. And Project Home Key, purchasing hotels and renovating them. This is what the inside looks like. This is by the way, I spent the night here too. Okay, but I spent the night when it was a crack, drug-infested, prostitution hotel. Myself and my partner in crime, we went there and we checked in. We paid our $60, whatever it was, and we went to my room first. Okay, and there's all these burn marks on the duvet, and then I pulled the sheets back, and there's like, oh my gosh, there's so much hair and blood stains, and I'm thinking, oh dear God, I don't know if I could actually sleep in this. And then my partner said, listen, you know what? I brought a black light. I said, oh, you're kidding me. She's like, this isn't bad enough. And by the way, I lifted up the mattress, and there was condoms and syringes, and I'm like, I don't think I could do this. And we turned off the lights, and sure enough, stuff splattered everywhere. And I'm like, okay, let's go look at your room. So we went to his room, and as we're there, the room next to it, the door had been busted in by the sheriffs, and we went in his, and it was just as bad, and we did the black light, and there was blood stains across the ceiling, like someone had shot their brains out. And I said, man, I gotta be honest. The only way I'm spending the night here tonight, I'm sleeping with you. I said, you're on that side of the bed, I'm on this side of the bed, but I'm not sleeping in my own place. I didn't feel safe. And as soon as I laid my head back, the person who was recording it, yelled, cockroaches! And I swear, these cockroaches came running right towards me from the side. I made it through the night, but this is what we did. We totally repurposed the entire building, and it is now a beautiful place where families are going to be able to come in and get a fresh start. So again, I'm not concerned about how we do it. It's that we do it, and we can really make a difference if we're willing. And we can make, there's going to be something wrong with every project. Every site is going to have a problem. We can always come up with excuses and reasons why we can't do it. Okay, but we're beyond that. We have to come up with solutions. And so whether it was rec and parkland, city parking lot, metro parking, Caltrans, recreation parking sites, we know that there's innovation out there. And so whether, the cost per units were very expensive at first, but then we were able to drive the price. The most expensive one was like $125,000 per unit that dropped all the way down to $42,000 per unit. The quick assembly, it meets basic necessities, air and heat, size, okay, all the things that you need. Also, I'm looking at Boxable. If you've never looked at Boxable, what a great solution. And so we're working right now to try to get Boxable in LA. This is for permanent housing, 400 square feet, all in $110,000, all in. See, the problem is that in LA, oftentimes when the city's in charge of doing it, they ended up charging $600,000, $700,000 per unit, and then the voters are getting frustrated. I got a phone call recently from Jeffrey Katzenberg from DreamWorks. He said, I'd like to come see one of your tiny home sites. Again, I'd love to meet Jeffrey Katzenberg. I'll meet you there. And I walk him and I show him everything. And at the end of it, he says to me, you're probably wondering why I'm here. I said, well, kind of. And he says, I'll tell you why I'm here. He says, because you're going to need more money. He goes, and the way things are going right now, you're not going to get more money because the taxpayers are fed up. They want to see results. They need to see what you're doing. When they see this, they're willing to give, and we have to continue to keep people motivated to give. And so anyhow, all of our sites, from washers and dryers to dog runs to case management, housing navigation, all the things that you would expect are there. And, again, I don't have all the answers. I have a lot of passion. I believe in what we're doing. I know we need to bring people indoors. and I know this needs to be replicated across the United States. Great things are happening across the United States. Great things are happening here. I'm not for one moment insinuating that we've got a corner on the market. No, we're just one player. We're one spoke in the wheel. But I do know this, that we're helping a lot of people. Every night, within a matter of months, we'll have 2,300 people indoors, and we're able to provide them the best possible care and get them back on the road to recovery and then move them into permanent housing. And let me finish with this. Do I believe that permanent, supportive, and affordable housing is the solution? Yes, I do. But the streets cannot be the waiting room for permanent housing. It takes 2-3 years at best sometimes to build these permanent supportive housing projects. Can you imagine being an outreach worker and you're going to go along the river where I see these encampments here in Sacramento and say, listen, I got great news for you. We just got funding. We're going to build permanent supportive housing. Hang in there for the next 3 years and I'll be back. That's demoralizing. That's not solving a problem. It's not either or, it's yes and. If I had hypothermia, you would not say, Ken, just wait in the snow until the doctor can see you. No, you're going to bring me indoors and you're going to make sure I'm okay until the doctor can see me. We must bring people indoors. And I think I'll leave it at that. I know we've got a panel. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Ken, so much. Oh, sorry. So I think you can see why we brought Ken up here. Amazing person. Thank you so much for your offering. With that, we've got 3 panelists to come up and speak and with different backgrounds. And I will kind of give you an overview one by one of them. I'll invite them up here, and then we'll let them tell you about themselves and what they're doing in their groups. First, we have Amber Celmer, who's going to be joining us. Amber graduated from Cal State University, Chico, where she received her BA in sociology. Immediately after college, she began a career in the building industry as marketing coordinator, and later advanced to new home sales rep. Her exposure to all facets of the industry, from land acquisition to land development, design, and even lending, is what ultimately led her to pursue the position in the Director of Strategy and Business Development for the leading valuation company in the nation. Most recently, however, Amber became the Development Director for Child Advocates of Placer County, reporting directly to the Executive Director and serving as the Interim Executive Director during his absence on sabbatical. With personal experience within the California foster care system, Amber pursued involvement in the California Youth Connection and other youth organizations over the last 20 years, which has served on the advisory board, committees, strategic planning commissions, and legislative committees. After 20-plus years of advocating for policy change and lobbying for her childhood experience, her childhood experience led her to realize her desire to make a long-lasting impact on the health of our community. Now as the Executive Director of Home Aid Sacramento, with a mission to build new lives for the Sacramento region's homeless through housing and community outreach, she is uniquely positioned to help our community on a micro level and is doing an incredible job. So thank you, Amber. Also joining us, the second panelist, is Christopher Holt, who is an architect, a colleague of mine, known him for years. He's been a licensed architect for 10 years, Dreyfus and Blackford, one of the teams that has been involved in our efforts to date. And Chris has worked on a lot of local community projects. I think most recently he's been working on the Mosaic event with the Museum of Science and Curiosity. And again, talk about, I mentioned earlier that everyone on these teams has done pro bono work. I don't know how many hours Chris's firm put in pro bono on that museum, but it's an amazing number. But it's an incredible project. Chris, he served on the board of the AIA Sacramento chapter for 8 years and served as president in 2020, I think a few years after I did. During his tenure, Chris developed a strategic plan which encourages collaboration among professions and nonprofit organizations. Chris has served as a planning commissioner and still does, I think, for the city of Woodland. Been there since 2011. And when they adopted their 2035 general plan, 2 cycles of the housing element. The past 3 years, Chris has worked with members of our group to develop housing and shelter solutions to address the homeless housing epidemic that grips our region and our site. So I've got to thank you for all of your efforts, Chris. And third, we have another dear friend and just an amazing woman, Nikky Mohanna. Nikky is principal of Mohanna Development and a company here in Sacramento, active in real estate acquisition, investment, and development, primarily in Northern California. She's currently heading various urban infill residential projects in downtown Sacramento and is actively involved with increasing housing through innovative construction methods and advocating for smart planning and policy. Nikky returned to Sacramento from London to focus on social impact development and increasing housing types here through innovative design. She recently completed construction of 19J Midtown. Some of you may know that project. Interesting about that, redevelopment went away 2012, 2013, which was the tool to get affordable housing built, to augment it. Well, it's not there anymore, so that was not available. The only way Nikky figured out the way to get affordable housing built is to make it small. You can't get any more funding making, but if you make them small enough, your rent can be, achievable to a lot of people. So just a really ingenious and a great project, Nikky. She leads with the belief that the city revitalization and successful development can't take place without creating opportunities across all income levels. Nikky is integrating this philosophy into her project through unique partnerships to alleviate homelessness and create employment. In the past several years, she has worked with community leaders to establish the North C Street campus. And a lot of you know where Loaves and Fishes is, where several nonprofits have been founded and housed, including Loaves and Fishes Women's Empowerment, which you'll hear about, Family Promise, and SEP's Money Management. She's currently working to create housing for homeless individuals that are being served by these nonprofits, including the most recent 43-unit cottage development to serve a transitional housing for the Women's Empowerment graduate. And we can't really talk about exactly where that is because some of the women there are escaping a violent environment, so it needs to be kept confidential, but incredible project. And Nikky currently serves on the board of Women's Empowerment, Homemade Sacramento, Amber's Group, Sac Metro Chamber, Midtown Association, and Housing Committee of the Urban Land Institute. So with that, I'd like to invite Amber first to come up and start. We'll go through each of the 3 folks. Thank you all very much. And okay.
This is blinding. So I have to say, Bob was asking me earlier, I mentioned to him, usually I come up here with a plan, and I'm not typically nervous about public speaking. However, my plan often derails. And I don't know if it's a feeling of nervousness that I have or excitement to be in a room filled with so many incredibly important and passionate people who collectively have the opportunity to tackle this daunting issue and figure out ways that we can collaborate. Many people in this room, and several of them who I have witnessed their passion firsthand quite recently. I saw Jeff Harris here and how he stepped up to in big ways to make contributions, and Nick Avdis. And so I'm incredibly excited for this opportunity to have this conversation as we tackle this issue together. A while ago, you mentioned, Bob, the comprehensive site plan that the mayor presented back in October of 2021. And I recall very specifically there was a comment made, a public comment, that I'm hoping, let me see, Ken, maybe you're a kind man, you can remind me at the end of this to go back there. But it has stuck with me since that moment. And it was a public comment by an individual who made reference to the unhoused and their association to hypodermic needles. And so that sticks with me to this day, so I'll come back to that. But I suppose I should introduce myself, right? My name is Lane Celmer. I'm the Executive Director of ULI Sacramento. And again, I know several people in this room who are familiar with what we do, but for those who are not as versed in the mission of ULI Sacramento, in essence, we build and renovate shelters and facilities for homeless populations, or those who are, and forgive me terminology, we have a lot of service providers in here, and I know language is incredibly important, so I want to use the appropriate terms that you've all agreed upon, but we build and renovate shelters and transitional housing facilities for those whose lives have been impacted in a way that deems them at risk of becoming homeless or unhoused. And so how we do that is we partner with local nonprofit service providers. And our goal is to help them increase their capacity to serve. Of course, with a huge importance, we're very passionate about dignified housing. I'm glad you touched on that, Ken. But we partner with these nonprofit service providers to help them increase their capacity to serve in recognizing that they are the experts in their field. But our power punch, and I like to use boxing terms because I come from a boxing family. I'm a little stronger than I look, but our power punch, I would say, is that we are the charitable arm of the North State Building Industry Association. And our unique and direct connection to the building industry is how we are able to garner in-kind donations. And that is how we are able to build and help the nonprofit service providers increase their capacity to serve. We have, on many occasions, achieved up to 87, most recently 87% in-kind rate because of the generosity of our building industry association. And so, and I don't know if I saw Mike Stretch in here. I'm pretty sure he did. So the North State Building Industry Association continues to be a major supporter of ours. And also Mike Weiss was in here recently on the St. John's program for Real Change. And he asked me if I had seen a shift in the contributions of our builders as a result of the market that we're in. And to the contrary, we have not. Our builders continue to step up in a big way. And I have a couple here who joined me today on our board, USA Construction Management and Next Group, they come to us asking for projects. They want projects. They want to make massive contributions. But in order for us to have projects, our supporters need to have the support of our county and of course on the state level. And so another unique opportunity or ability that Homemade is able to bring to these service providers is our connectivity not only to the building industry, county, city relationships, other municipalities, to bring the right people together. The only thing I know for sure is that I don't know everything. And so there is value in trusting the experts in what they do, right? And so with all due respect to the building industry, because they put out they do important work that makes it possible for us to increase the capacity for our service providers to serve. But let's be honest, the real work, the important work, is the work of our service providers, the feet on the ground, these incredibly talented and committed individuals who are tackling the issue firsthand. They're the ones who need the support. And so again, I'm really excited to have a group of people who, my hope at the end of this is that the leaders in this room will settle a little bit more deeply into their leadership role and have less conversations and certainly a lot more action toward this major health and safety issue that is in front of us. So I'll go back to services and the importance of the services. Can I have some water? Thank you. You didn't remind me, Ken. However, I'm still here. our passion to partner with service providers who offer individuals services, sorry to sound so repetitive, but the tools that they need to become self-sufficient on our own doesn't come from anywhere. We believe strongly in the continuum of care. And so the fact of the matter is, this comment that I heard, this public comment in reference to associating hypodermic needles with those experiencing homelessness really struck a chord with me and made me realize that that is a common sentiment. And I would argue to say that perhaps many people in this room, we all want to help, right, toward the issue of homelessness, but not in our backyard, because we have this perception of the unhoused looking like hypodermic needles. But that is far from accurate. And in fact, homelessness looks like many people in this room. We're all vulnerable in some regard. Homelessness looks like me. You mentioned in my introduction, I come from the California foster care system. And so statistically, and I certainly don't want to be a poster child for a foster care system or a homeless individual that is not becoming of anyone, and it's quite embarrassing, but I feel an obligation to tell everyone in this room that the services provided by our nonprofit service providers have a long-term impact on this issue. They're not putting Band-Aids, and I hate to say, but for many years, that's what we've been doing to tackle this issue. Is I'm a mommy, so I use the Band-Aid analogy, but Band-Aids over a gaping head wound. And we are, as a result, this issue is compounding. And in order for us to have a long-term impact, we need to believe in these services and provide people with the tools that they need to become self-sufficient. And so while statistically I should definitely either be dead, unhoused, part of the children's, part of the adult system of care, right, a burden to our communities, but then perhaps even with some children who are part of the children's system of care, but I'm not. Because of the nonprofit service providers in this room and in our region, I was afforded the opportunity to become a proud, is this weird, tax-paying citizen. I don't know if any of you are happy that you're taxpayers, but I'm very grateful for that. But also, I'm able to contribute to this cause, rather than be a recipient of the services. So the long-lasting impact is there. The outcomes are proven. And, I just, again, I cannot stress enough, while the community outreach piece is such a challenge for us, we need to recognize that while we don't want the hypodermic needles in our backyards, the value that these facilities bring to our neighborhoods far outweigh the former. So I feel like I had a lot more to say that just kind of escaped me, but thank you all for being here, and certainly I invite you to ask any questions that might help you better understand how we can collectively address this issue and hopefully leave here with action steps. And again, less conversations, more action. So, and thank you, Bob and John, for continuing to be frustrated and not losing steam.
Thank you so much, Amber. Some amazing people we've got in this community helping us move things forward. Next, I'd like to bring up my friend and colleague, Chris Holt, architect, to talk about what he's been doing. And I should mention, as Amber said, everyone will have a Q&A session after this, and the boards back there, too, can be a contributor to discussion as well. Chris?
Somebody said this was a panel discussion, not a stand in front of the lectern and speak. I'm not prepared. I'm not prepared. Okay, all right. And I wanted to try and really address everything that was being said in the moment. I think I took a lot of cues from Amber in that I wanted to hear Ken speak and then really address our local conditions as it pertains to kind of maybe looking into the future, perhaps 10 years into the future. Our team's only really been at it for 3 years. I know Nikky and Amber have been at it for a lot longer. But Ken's got 13 years on us, and he's out ahead of us. And so it was really nice to hear Ken's story and how he's gotten to where he is. And I really wanted to come and take that in before I really came up with any notes. So I've been feverishly writing. I've got 2 little sources here. I'm going to try to keep it together, in the moment. So we represent a broad group of private sector professionals, developers, land use, architects, land use attorneys, architects, landscape architects, structural engineers, and even contractors. And really, one of the key members of our team is our service provider, Steve Waters, that was called out earlier by Bob. And Bob, I got to tell you, you took all my points, Bob. You took all the points I was going to talk about with our project, so I'm going on the fly here. We've been working at it for 3 years. We started by presenting to professional or the public business improvement districts, or the PBIDs, specifically the Downtown Partnership and the Midtown Association. We worked very tirelessly with the other architectural firms to develop the schemes that we see here. We really came at this thinking about it, and I love Ken's part about the frostbite. And that the streets can't be a waiting room to get indoors. But we started thinking about this as it's a multi-stage, multi-step process to come off of the street, right? Many of these people have been unhoused and have had very traumatic experiences living in housing, and it's a gradual path. But we got to get them off the street first. We have to get them into a place where they can start to heal and start to get the services they need, the addiction treatment that they need, and then they can start to step up the ladder to that permanent supportive housing. And we don't have 3 years, as Ken said, to get them into that permanent supportive housing. We have to act now. And so a lot of the ideas that we came up with, and our team, we worked tirelessly to roll around different ways to rapidly deploy these systems. But we came up with this idea that really you need to meet the homeless individuals or unhoused people where they're at, right? Oftentimes, and I'm not going to try to give statistics because I'm not that good with numbers. I'm an architect, not an engineer. But oftentimes, homeless individuals or unhoused people are in the neighborhoods that they used to live in. They haven't gone far, right? And there are unused parcels of land in every one of our neighborhoods. And there's no reason that we can't take, some of these solutions like the small, tiny homes and deploy 50 or 75 or 100 out into one of these open parcels to get the people on the path. Take that first step. Get off the street. And, don't sleep in the dirt and be like Ken. I got to tell you, Ken, I watched that movie on your website. I couldn't have done it. I have no conception of what that experience is like. And I think that's something else we need to keep, in our hearts as we approach these people. We all go home to our warm beds and our meals and our drinks and whatever else it is that we do. We drive our cars. And we don't know where they're at and what they're going through. And we got to have compassion and empathy as we approach these problems. And I'll try to keep myself brief because I know we need to have comments. But I think one of the key elements that our team is really advocating for is it's a regional problem. It's not a city problem. It's not a county problem. It's a regional problem. It's all around us. And every one of our communities needs help. And we can really join together and create a system that can be deployed into many different cities because it's all the same problem and a lot of the same tactics will work. But ultimately, as Ken would say, we kind of need 3 parties to be in lockstep to make this happen. The private industry, all of us here who have been working very hard, can do only so much. Government officials and elected officials can do so much, and all of our nonprofit service providers can only do so much. Unless we're all working together and moving in the same direction, we're never going to go anywhere. We're going to continue to spin and wonder why we don't have any results. And finally, just as a reaction to Ken's statement about the shelter emergency, I think that is a critical piece that we also need. We need to relieve some of the regulation and some of the issues that can really stop these projects in their tracks by having our government officials put out that same type of an emergency order. So with that, leave it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Great job. It's been. I'm sorry. What was that, Mary Lynn? Did we? Yes. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you again, Chris. And I think thirdly, I'd like to bring up Nikky Mohanna, who is just doing some incredible things here too. So.
Thank you, Bob. It is truly inspiring to see all of these familiar faces in this room. And I think as we talk about the problem, I see all of the resources right here. I know that we can make a dent, and I know it's overwhelming, but we've come a long way. And as some of you might know me as a real estate developer focused on housing production, my experience and involvement with homelessness started far before I embarked in real estate. When I was 10 years old, Sister Libby at Loaves and Fishes gave me the unique opportunity to volunteer every day at the Mary House at Loaves and Fishes, where we handed out necessities to the homeless women who were coming in every day. And her giving me that opportunity really changed my life. It set the course for what I wanted to do in my future. And I think, as Ken was mentioning, we really have to see the humanity in this issue. Because when you interact with our homeless guests, you really start to understand that if any one of us were in that position, we would end up also sleep deprived. I personally couldn't handle it. I know Ken was amazing enough to be able to go through those 100 hours. I've tried it myself. It's a very difficult feat. And I think, at a very young age, I started to recognize that homelessness comes in many forms. And, as Amber was saying, unfortunately, a lot of the community perception for a very long time has been that we don't want them here, we don't want them in our backyard. But what we really start to recognize when we look at each and every individual is that, when I was at the Mary House at a young age, I started to see that the people coming in, there was many women who had been chronically homeless, that, they knew everyone there. They had been there for 10, 20 years. I mean, they knew everything about the facility. They were teaching me how to do my job. But then, I would see a woman coming in for the very first time. It was her first time homeless. It was her first day. And you could see they were startled. They were anxious. And, even though I was only 10 years old, I, really learned how to navigate those sentiments and those feelings and try to make them feel welcome. And over time, I started recognizing that these women, from the very first day of homelessness to the days and days that followed, it started getting challenging for them. Their personalities changed. They were not the same person months later. And so I think it's critical for us to recognize that we have to stop it before it happens. That's our first step. And we all know that we're in a housing crisis. We know that we're not producing enough housing here in California to meet the needs of our population. And so it exacerbates the problem. The fact that, in our point in time count in 2022, just last year, homelessness had risen 67% over the past 2 years to 9,287 individuals in Sacramento County. It is unacceptable. And we have the resources in this room to solve this problem before it gets worse. We don't want to end up like LA, where we have 70,000 homeless people. And we don't have to, because we have the capabilities. You look at these boards, and there's so many ideas here. and so many service providers that are implementing those services. So, when I was at Loaves and Fishes, we were feeding 800 homeless people a day. And the dining kitchen, which I was also doing for a few years. And so after a few years of being there, I started recognizing, we're giving them a fish, but we need to teach them how to fish. And so across the street in a facility that we owned, we started opening up these nonprofits, which, included Clean and Sober, Women's Empowerment, Family Promise, SEP's Money Management, and we really tried to give them the resources to get out of homelessness so that we gave them hope that there was a solution. And, we can't help everybody, but there are people who want help and they want to get out of their situation, and we can help those people. And so, we were very successful. Women's Empowerment had an 87% success rate in getting people employment. That was their main mission. Their main mission was to ensure that the homeless women that were being served would be able to create a stable life for themselves and their families. And the route to that was through gaining the self-confidence and the empowerment and the job training to be able to get that job. And so 87% of the people that were going through our 8-week job training program were achieving that. And it was incredible. We've had over 1,500 homeless women who've now gained employment and really gotten their lives back on track. But in the past few years, especially with the pandemic, we started recognizing that all of these service providers are doing such great work, including Women's Empowerment and all of the providers we work with, but they were unable to fulfill their missions any longer because no longer was having a job or being clean and sober enough to obtain housing, to have a stable life. And so a lot of our nonprofits here in Sacramento had to start re-looking at the issue and saying, well, what can we do? I mean, our mission is no longer being fulfilled because we have a housing crisis, and working a minimum wage job is no longer enough to maintain a stable home. And so we really were dealing with a very difficult situation for a service provider who's not in the world of real estate development, who's not in housing production. How do we all of a sudden transition into housing? And this is a conflict that a lot of our nonprofits face, and they're already severely overburdened. And so, we stepped in and we said, well, it looks like we need to start producing housing. When we have such a success rate over the past 20 years, we can't let that falter. And so we started to look at options for housing. We've had, essentially what we've done is we've had 2 projects underway that have actually gone through and are successful. We're working on our 3rd that's supposed to open next month. But we said, how do we create an innovative program that doesn't wait for the permanent housing? We know that's necessary, but there has to be something we can do in the interim period. And it has to be through innovation, it has to be through creativity, and it has to be a short-term solution that's able to be open today. And so we started looking at the prefabricated tiny homes, and we were able to work with the landlords who have, the repurposed buildings is another avenue that we started looking at. And we said, okay, well, if Women's Empowerment as an organization comes in and we master lease these units, because we need to create a system in place that allows our graduates to be able to rent these homes. Because as you guys know, in the system in our real estate world, there are credit checks you have to pass, background screening, can't have an eviction on your record. These are all of the barriers and obstacles that prevent our graduates, even when they get a job, from being able to get that house. And we can't let them get back on the street. And that was the real challenge, was that seeing how hard these women had worked to change their lives. They put everything into that. That achievement was so challenging, and they did it. And yet they were still on the street with that job, but they were on the street. And we knew that wasn't acceptable. So we're taking that risk to get involved in housing. And we're saying, okay, well, why don't we create a subleasing program where we take the risk away from the landlord so that they don't have to deal with the financial stability of who's living in those homes. But we take that risk, we provide the financial stability, and we overcome the barriers for our homeless graduates. And so we created this innovative subleasing program where we go and get the homes. We have, our next project is a 43-unit prefabricated cottage village that we have just secured. And we have our women there, a few of them now, but we're fully opening next month. So basically what we're doing is we're providing a rental subsidy. And thanks to the county and the city for helping with the funding, we've raised money through private donations, through the county who's been very generous with us. And we're creating this program so that we mitigate that risk and we come in, and these are the types of innovations that we need to see, because if we don't start thinking about these interim problems, we're going to have a much more long-term issue where every day that someone's out on the street, it becomes that much more difficult to get them off the street. And so, the way that we're looking at this is how do we create something that we stop it before it happens. We try to come in and we produce the housing that is necessary in an innovative form. And they're not big. They're 400 square foot cottages, but it's transitional. And the methodology that we have in place is that they live there for anywhere between 12 to 24 months. And it's really like a tiered system where the first quarter they don't pay rent and they really just save up their money for that security deposit. The second quarter they pay 25%, the third quarter they pay 50%, and the fourth quarter 75%. And that's how we create that transitional model that it really, once you get towards the end, you're really incentivized to go and get another home. But of course, we can't succeed without the permanent housing that's there in the future. And we're hopeful that the efforts of the state and the city and the county will succeed. But I think with all of these ideas here, we know that until that happens, we have to have something in place now. And I think there's a lot of great minds in this room. I know it can be done. So thank you all for joining us today and being here for the conversation.
Thank you very much, Nikki. I recall a conversation I had, some years back with Nikki and her father, who's in the audience here, Mo. How small can a unit be that people can live in? And I was mentioning to her that one of the best places I've lived is a 370 square foot apartment in Boston, in a converted 1930s concrete parking structure, and it was just wonderful. You spend a lot of time outdoors. So, the concern, could 400 square feet work? Absolutely, and it certainly has. I mean, she's been filling things up. I've seen the units that she has. I've seen the tiny homes. I've seen the units that Amber's opened up. They're all extremely livable, and I could live in any of them. They're a lot better than Ken sleeping on the ground, certainly in LA. So again, I want to thank everybody. And what I'd like to do now is invite Ken, hopefully, to come up and join us at the table, and then open this up to questions and. Oh, okay. I think we've got mics here we can share.
We're live on our mics here. Test. Okay, first question here, and then I'll take the mic around if, just give me a hand raise. Okay, you're next.
Hi, I'm Uriel Strand. I am one of the community members of the California Corrections Partnership Advisory Board. And what that board is about is transitioning low-level offenders back into normal living. And you won't be surprised to know that there's an overlap between our population and the homeless population. And so one of the things that I have been advocating is how can citizens participate in that process? And the answer I've been getting is that they need to be working with the CBOs, the community-based organizations that subcontract with the staff. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for that to be happening with these wonderful projects. And so I don't know if you have anything to say about that specifically, but I just wanted to put that on everybody's radar screen. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm really enjoying this. I'm Shireen Miles, and this is Diane Wolf. We are both from Sacramento area congregations together, and we've been working on homelessness and housing for many years. First, just a note is that we will be having a policy meeting and lobby day on April 20th in the Capitol to talk about low-income housing, to talk about the housing crisis in California. But the question I wanted to raise here is that I think we all know that one of our big obstacles is NIMBYism. And it rears its ugly head every time, and it's been really preeminent in our region. I have wondered if there was any way that we could come together as a collaborative to create some kind of a awareness campaign to let people know that there is hope and that there are great solutions out there, because I think something that contributes to NIMBYism and that contributes to people, the pushback we get, is the general population feeling hopeless and feeling like nothing is happening. That's not really the case. It's an uphill battle, but a lot of good things are happening. So how could we turn the tide together and help people understand that there are solutions?
Is this live? Just a quick response to that. Totally agree. I mean, NIMBY is a huge issue. There's a website and an organization called YIMBY, which is just great. I mean, a lot of it's Bay Area based, but it's really trying to promote projects, affordable housing, and let people know that they can be good additions to their neighborhoods. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great point. Obviously, it's been one of the biggest obstacles in creating some of these projects. No one wants it in their backyard. That's always a challenge. I think, the reason why we brought Ken up here from LA is to show that there are successful projects, and the neighbors surrounding those projects who were in opposition prior to the project happening are now saying, well, this is certainly not what I thought it would be, and they're happy that it's there. And I think that's really the key, is to show through it really takes project by project, and to allow the community to come in, to leave it open, and to let them see that the population that we're serving is really, they have this perception of what homeless is that, in my opinion, is wrong, as someone who's worked with the homeless population for a very long time. Because if any of us were on the street for that long, for that many years, I think we would all, as Ken said, in a few hours, look homeless, but act homeless. I mean, that's just part of our human nature. So I think it's critical to bring people into these projects that are successful, to show them how it can be done and how it really doesn't impede their lifestyle, how it's far better than the encampments that we see every single day on the street. And it really, it takes time and it takes a lot of community engagement. But Ken's done it in Los Angeles, and we're very proud of him and proud of his projects. And I think, he's here to show us how we can do it here, and I'm confident that we can. Certainly our project at Women's Empowerment will be available for people to see, and I think they'll learn that when they come, that it's just like any other community.
I would just add real quick. I always tell people there's two models. There's a Starbucks model or the stadium model. Okay, the stadium model basically is Skid Row. Okay, we're going to put everybody in a big stadium in one geographical area and try to address this. It doesn't work. It's a disaster. But the Starbucks model, Starbucks is everywhere. Everywhere you go, there's Starbucks. Every community needs to help out. Many hands makes light lifting. And when we all do it together, it's not an overburden on any community. We're all working together.
Just a quick comment. I know what John Hodgson and I have been saying for the last 3 years is that we have to get, and I think Ken has shown this, we have to get one of these facilities up and running so people can see what it could look like. So we've been struggling with that.
So, of course, the answer is that we need both transitional housing and permanent affordable housing. But the reality is there isn't money for that right now. And so I'm curious whether you're pushing to build more transitional housing, and whether you're open to people aren't going to stay 2 years, they're going to stay 5 years or 10 years because the affordable housing isn't going to catch up.
If I could respond, our team really started with that kind of 6-month window, thinking, hey, we get them into something for 6 months and then they can move on to more permanent things. And it became very readily apparent very quickly that just isn't the case. And so, yeah, now you're starting to look at more permanent transitional solutions, such as the tiny homes or the boxables. Pallet shelters is one of the products that we've looked at. And it really is, you're starting to plan for 2 years. And so you're thinking about site amenities and how do you make this a livable space for these people for a longer term until we can bring that permanent supportive housing online. I also think that on the opposite side of that, we need to remove barriers to that permanent supportive housing, including a lot of NIMBYism, which I believe the state has been acting on, and that's somewhat helpful. But I think as a community, we all still need to rally around making it right and making it fit our communities where we live.
Sounds good. Good morning. Hi, I'm Matt Kiesling, and I am attorney by trade, but also have been on the board of Sacramento Steps Forward for years. So I wanted to first off thanks Bob and John if you're watching for this panel. I think it's important to have this discussion, and thank everybody for participating. Ken, I have a question for you about your projects, which, by the way, are amazing. Thanks for showing those to us today and telling us more about it. But you mentioned in your discussion that your projects are also clean and sober. And understanding federal funding, we know that they have a housing first model, which means that if you require clean and sober, you also don't qualify for federal or state funds. How is it that you make these projects pencil without the availability of some sort of government subsidy?
Yeah, let me clarify. When I say, I'm not necessarily saying they're clean and sober sites. I'm saying there's no drugs, no alcohol, no weapons allowed inside. Okay, so we have what's called amnesty lockers on the outside of all of our facilities. Let's take an example. If a woman has been living on the streets and she's always kept a knife with her to feel safe, well, you can't bring that knife inside the shelter, but you can put it in your amnesty locker. Our security guard will open and unlock the amnesty lockers, and they can put things in there. They can't put guns in there, but sometimes there might be drug paraphernalia, things like that. I give a lot of tours to our sites, and usually one of the biggest comments that people will say is, "It's so quiet. Does anyone even live here?" I said, yes. I said, if I walk through your neighborhood, how loud is it? It's quiet because people are inside. And when it comes to the substance use, I am more concerned with people's progress than I am perfection. If we were to go through your neighborhood, okay, any of our neighborhoods, and say anybody who's gotten high or drunk, intoxicated, in the past 12 months, you need to vacate your home and live on the streets. Yeah. What would happen to our homeless population? Yet we want to take people who've been traumatized, okay, dealing with addiction, and say, you know what, you're going to move in here, but now you need to live, above reproach. It's not going to happen. So instead, we work with people and meet them where they're at. We are a low barrier, harm reduction, so we do meet the criteria, okay, for federal funding and for state funding. But we don't give up on people. We work with people to help them in that process.
My name is Steve Hopcraft. I'm a 40-plus year resident of East Sacramento, which some would call the epicenter of NIMBYism. And I'm retired and I want to help, and I'm looking for allies to help cite some supportive housing project in East Sacramento. So we're looking for allies, we're looking for sites, and we're looking for partners, and for any advice you would have about the best steps for overcoming NIMBYism. I mean, I love the 3-day open house, but we have to get there.
I would just say we have an abundance of town hall meetings all the time. And the only way to overcome misinformation is with truth. We overcome with facts. We overcome with outcome. We overcome with data. And you're always going to have people that, somebody once said fear stands for false evidence appearing real. And that's really what we have. We have so many people that they're fearful that you're going to be bringing drug addicts and prostitution, and you're going to drive down property values. You're going to destroy what we have. You're creating a skid row here. And I say, you know what? That's what they said in 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020. Let me show you the sites. And so sometimes it's just showing people what's real, not what you fear, but what's actual.
Quickly, I have one response. And so we do have local examples of things that have been done. And one example, Homemade Sacramento, we just had a ribbon cutting 2001, summer of 2001. Mark Boyce is here. I didn't see Julie, but St. John's Program for Real Change. The picture was up there, but I didn't make reference to it. But that was that's a tiny home community where behind a refurbished office building that provides services to guests they're women and children who are trying to overcome substance abuse. And the graduates from that project, and I'm talking about St. John's Program for Real Change if I didn't say that, the graduates now have access to housing in the parking lot. We were able to turn the parking lot into provide 11 units, manufactured units, forgive me, serving up to 55 individuals. And that wasn't always a popular idea for the community, right? In fact, there was huge backlash, understandably so. But since a lot of the supporters of St. John's Program for Real Change are the community members around, because they have proof right in front of them of the value that this place brings. Because the unhoused are still going to be there. They're just not going to be in a safe space, and they're going to be more likely to maybe commit crimes and become a nuisance. And so we have those examples. And then also First Step Communities, there's a incredible example, Grove Avenue, now 50 tough sheds that have been converted into tiny homes, if you will, for emancipated foster youth who are trying to navigate life after having the traumatic experience of foster care with no one to turn to, right? If anybody's familiar, upon emancipation or 18, whichever comes first, you're left to fend for yourself without any. I couldn't imagine my children at 18 not needing me for questions or help. But these emancipated foster youth now have access to services and shelter, and the outcomes are proven. And it was the same type of situation. It was not easy to get the community to embrace this idea. And now the community is, quite frankly, one of the biggest supporters, and they pour their own resources. So we have examples here that I know these organizations would welcome individuals who want to expand upon these facilities. I know that they would welcome these tours. And so I encourage you all to either ask us for those examples, seek them out, and go step foot and get empowered and educate yourselves on what homelessness really looks like, but also the value that these facilities and these shelters bring to your communities, to your backyard.
Thank you. Yeah, Ken, really appreciate it. I think what you're doing is absolutely brilliant. Thanks to ULI for putting this on. It's super inspirational. Just two quick questions. One, your funding mix, is it primarily public or private? Just how does that look in a breakdown? And second question is, what policy recommendations do you have? I mean, Sacramento has the state in our backyard. I view this as kind of a state-county private partnership, but you've dealt with a lot of policymakers. What policy recommendations do you have?
For funding. Yeah, and as far as for funding for us, originally, it wasn't until the city of Los Angeles really started to say, hey, we have to address this issue, okay? Whether it was through compassion or compulsion, I don't care, okay? Sometimes it's a mix of both. And so they were forced a little bit to have to deal with it, and so that really worked well. And then all of a sudden they were scrambling to find service providers, and there weren't enough service providers that could actually step up and do it. And so, but like our funding right now, over 50% comes through contracts, and those contracts are administered through LAHSA, which is the Los Angeles Housing Services Authority. It's a joint power venture between the county and the city, because LA County was doing all of its efforts, LA City was doing all of its efforts, and they found they were kind of duplicating certain efforts, or they were pointing fingers at each other, and it's like, who should be doing what? And so they were able to come up with LAHSA, which the funds funnel to a central agency, and each of them have representation, county and the city, and so they put out the RFPs, and then nonprofits we respond to those. So over 50% now, just a little over 50% comes through that, and then we have a dwindling percentage, about 15% that comes through our thrift stores. And then the rest comes through, we do, direct mail and our events. I just ran from Las Vegas to Los Los Angeles. It was part of, we called it our all-in campaign. I jumped off the Strat Hotel and then the 108 stories. Then I pushed all these chips into the center of a poker table and said, I'm all in for housing. And myself and Rowan, we had a police escort and a fire escort behind us. We ran all the way down the boulevard, and we got to the end. They peeled off, and we ran to Prim, and we ran across a dry lake bed, up and over the Mojave Preserve, down to Ludlow, jumped on, and then we got hit Route 66, and we ran to Barstow and Victorville, and it was, but part of that was, we raised $310,000. So we're constantly doing fundraisers and stupid, crazy things to keep a spotlight on homelessness and remind people that, listen, this is a real issue. We have to address this. So, but the second part of the question you were asking.
Policy recommendations from the state and county, like how do we get more funding?
I heard someone say, if you guys have passed, if you have an emergency, shelter ordinance, that was this, because then that relieves some of the CEQA ordinances and these restrictions and these requirements that you have. Then it's a matter of just really having champions on the political side. I learned a long time ago, my arms are way too short to box with City Hall. They are. I can't win. If I can't get a champion on a political side, then I'm probably not going to pursue it, because it's very expensive. It's a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of effort. But when you've got political champions on the inside that say, you know what, we're going to do it right here, and then we can partner together, that public-private partnership is powerful.
Thank you. My name is Sean Loloy. I'm a council member at City of Sacramento. The Grove project that you alluded to, it's a phenomenal project, because something I share with everyone is there are times that I drive by it and I completely pass the project. And I have to make a U-turn and come back to it. So that's how well the project is being run. But I do have a question, and that's more of policy and legislative. If it takes to raise funds for affordable housing, it's taking anywhere between 14 to 48 months to get those funds secured. How do you see us cities to be able to get away from, like, we're stuck behind the 8 ball? So, I have a project in my district that since 2017, they've been trying to raise money for affordable housing. What do you see, and why, considering that this is such an emergency, why are there so many red tapes when it comes to our state level and even our federal level? Are the legislators are serious about fixing this issue and get these vulnerable people off the street? If so, why aren't these red tapes removed so those fundings can take place a lot faster than 48 months? Thank you.
Well, thank you, Councilmember Loloy. I think that to be fair, yes, you're right. It takes too long, and affordable. Ken was saying it takes 3 years for the construction. Yes, for the actual funding and completion and entitlements, like we're looking at anywhere from 5